Let's break this down for you and bring in Charles Kanjama, an advocate of the High Court, is joining us from our City Center studio. Kanjama, if you can hear me, what are your thoughts on the back and forth, specifically from the office of the President?
I think, Linda, the first thing I would say is that the decision of the President that was made yesterday by his office not to appoint a tribunal was clearly an ill-conceived decision. Today he has changed his mind, he has appointed the tribunal, and we need to applaud him for that. There is a saying that goes, a wise man changes his mind, a fool never. In this situation, in light of the unanimous view of our lawyers on this issue, the President has changed his mind. I think we need to applaud him and now wait to see what the tribunal will unearth.
Okay, here's the thing, Kanjama. So this tribunal has been set up by the President, but then there is a case currently in court touching on Justice Philip Tunoi and the retirement age. So here's the question that a lot of people are asking. So if the court gets to decide that he needs to retire at 70, where then does this leave the tribunal?
The jurisdiction of the tribunal is dependent on the fact that Justice Tunoi is still a judge of the Supreme Court. In the event Justice Tunoi is found not to be validly a judge because he should have retired, or in the event that Justice Tunoi himself decides to voluntarily retire, then the tribunal's mandate will come to an end. We saw this happening in the case of the former Deputy Chief Justice Nancy Baraza when she retired or resigned rather than face a tribunal.
Oh, the Supreme Court has 7 members. That is, you have the Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice, and 5 other judges. And for it to be properly constituted, it must have at least 5 judges. So as we know, the Chief Justice, that is Willie Mutunga, has opted to retire later in this year, probably June. Deputy Chief Justice Kalpana Rawal and, of course, Tunoi are in court over retirement age. And, of course, we're also focusing on that tribunal that has now been set up to probe Justice Tunoi. The question is, this leaves that court with 3 judges. Does Kenya still have a Supreme Court from where you stand?
Under Article 163 of the Constitution, it's very clear that the quorum of the Supreme Court, the full bench, is at least 5 judges. So for as long as we will have 5 judges able to sit, there is no cause for concern. The reason why we are a bit concerned is because we know the retirement cases may affect both Justice Rawal and Justice Tunoi, who is also facing the tribunal. We are also aware that the Chief Justice Willie Mutunga has expressed his intention to retire in June this year. So in the event these 3 judicial offices fall vacant, then we will have a crisis. My expectation is that if a vacancy arises in the position of Justice Rawal and Justice Tunoi, it will be up to Justice Willie Mutunga to probably reconsider his decision to retire, at least until we have filled some of those vacancies in the event they arise.
So in the event that he does not reconsider?
There's also the question of Justice Willie Mutunga reaching his own retirement age of 70. And the question is whether he will reach that age in June this year or in June next year. So if the 3 judges will be out of the Supreme Court at the same time, then we'll have a crisis, because it means the Supreme Court will not be able to deal with any substantive matter until that position is addressed. Oh,
so whichever way this tribunal goes, at the end of it all, probably we don't know how this is going to go, but in the event that they actually find that Justice Philip Tunoi has a case to answer, and we've seen this in other jurisdictions, you get to a point where people now start asking for retrial, especially on cases that judges who are being probed have handled. Do you foresee that happening in Kenya, that people will go back and ask for retrials in cases that Justice Tunoi has handled before?
I think it would be quite speculative to imagine that because an allegation has been made in one case, it affects all the judicial determinations of a particular judge. You can only seek revisiting of a decision on the basis of cogent evidence that there was some irregularity in that particular decision. Right now, the only case that is being probed is on the Kidero and Waititu election petition and the circumstances around that. So I would only foresee that case as being subject to revisiting.
So looking at that case against Justice Philip Tunoi, are you worried about the credibility of the Supreme Court of Kenya?
Sorry, I did not get your last question.
Looking at the probe that is now focusing on Justice Philip Tunoi, are you worried about the credibility of the Supreme Court of Kenya? From where
all actors in the judicial sector, legal justice sector, are worried. It's also important, Linda, let me add, that under the current proceedings, in the event the tribunal does come up with a finding that is adverse to Justice Tunoi, the Constitution allows him to appeal within 10 days from the decision of that tribunal to the very same Supreme Court where he sits. So this is yet another possibility that can open, I don't want to call it a can of worms, but open a situation of anxiety among the stakeholders in the legal justice system. Will the Supreme Court be able to deal with a claim against one of its own judges? My personal belief is they can, but the optics of the matter, the perception of the public may be different.
Charles Kanjama from our City Center studio, always a pleasure speaking to you, shedding some light for us on that tribunal that has now been appointed to look into the conduct of Supreme Court Judge Philip Tunoi.